Just when you think you finally made it out of 2017 alive, Dan DiDio does an interview with somebody associated with Comicsgate, and we have to go back to the same stupid argument or debate or whatever the hell it was that we were dealing with 6 years ago that it felt like we had moved past quite substantially by that point. But no, anytime anyone actually goes out and I guess talks to Comicsgate or acts like they're not bad people, comic book creators decide this is the time to lose our minds and remind people that Comicsgate is bad or something like that. Now we've got allegations of blacklisting by Larrry, Hama, and Mark Waid going against Dan DiDio. Just shocking timing on this one. Dan DiDio goes out and does an interview with John De La Rose, which apparently he didn't get permission from Jamal Igle and Heather Antos and Mark Russell and Larrry Hama and Mark Waid. So now everyone's going out and with pitchforks or something like this is going to work. I think at this point it's been proven that none of these people have any power or influence over really anybody except for maybe 12 people on Twitter. And what they're getting mad about is so innocuous. John De La Rose, I guess during the interview as he's promoting this book, asked him about like woke culture and comic books. And quite frankly, Dan DiDio gave the most, I'll call it a non-answer. He didn't really even say anything. He didn't say anything for woke comic books or against woke comic books. He just gave a very bland description or explanation of kind of what's going on and moved on. He didn't say anything for the most part. You know, people sent me the articles like, you need to talk about this. I was like, there's nothing here to talk about. Dan DiDio literally did what you would expect a man that was the publisher for DC Comics to do. He gave a non-answer and evaded the question because he didn't want to talk about it. But that wasn't enough. Merely sitting down and talking to someone associated with Comicsgate was enough to get Dan DiDio in hot water. G.I. Joe creator Larrry Hama and Kingdom Come creator Mark Waid recently accused Dan DiDio of blacklisting them from DC Comics. Hama and Waid's comments came in reaction to DC artist Jamal Igle announcing he was ending his personal and business relationships with DiDio due to the former DC publisher doing an interview promoting his Ancient Enemies comic book series with John De La Rose. Oh my goodness, a comic book professional, a publisher went out there and did an interview with a channel that talks about comic books to promote their work? Oh, but it wasn't on the approved list, as if Dan DiDio needs to go talk to Jamal Igle or Mark Waid or Larrry Hama or anybody about who he can actually talk to or promote his comic books with. It's like the most petty thing in the world. What, are we back in fourth grade now? Are you not going to let him sit at your lunch table? Is that what it is? Maybe you're going to take a hawker into his green beans and snick it to the guy next to you. I got Dan DiDio. He wasn't supposed to be hanging out with the enemy or something like this. The dude is running a new comic book publisher for Frank Miller, and he needed to get the word out. Who is he supposed to talk to? Does Jamal Igle have 10,000 subscribers? How about Heather Antos? Does she have 10,000 subscribers? Who else is Dan DiDio supposed to go talk to go out there and promote his stuff? No one goes and reads CBR. No one reads Bleeding Cool. No one reads the Comics Beat. Newsarama doesn't really even cover comic books anymore. Shockingly, he went out there and talked to somebody that covers the comic book industry on YouTube, and it's got him in hot water. And some of these things are absolutely ridiculous. The Mark Waid one, I take umbrage with, but the Larrry Hama accusation is the best. Hama accused DiDio of blacklisting him, writing, he blacklisted me at the same time I was blacklisted at Marvel. I didn't work for like 8 years. He asked me to take on a title that I thought should have been written by a woman and told him so. He did the same thing to Priest. So let me get this straight, Larrry Hama, because I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I'm only going to go by the words that you presented in your rebut, following up to Jamal Igle, which we'll get to. Dan DiDio blacklisted you from DC Comics for 8 years by offering you a job that you turned down. That's it. He offered you a job that you said, I don't want this job. I think a woman should write that. And he said, well, okay, I guess you're not going to write for DC Comics because you're not interested in the work that I'm offering you. Why would he go back? So you can lecture him some more? Why would Dan DiDio go to Larrry Hama and ask him, what is the gender of the person that should be writing this comic book? Larrry Hama, I would like to make a new Metal Men comic book. What do you think the race of the writers should be? Because that's really what you're here for. You're not actually here to go and pitch comic books and take job offers from people when they're offering them to you. It sounds to me like Dan DiDio had like an ounce of self-respect and was like, what the fuck is Larrry Hama trying to tell me who can and can't write a comic book based on their gender? What a fucking moron. And then he moved on to the next person, offered them the job, and likely they took it. And guess what they probably got after that? More work for being dependable. You don't blacklist people by offering them work. It's the dumbest conclusion I've ever fucking heard of in my life. It's like, are you kidding me? He offered me a job that I turned down, and that's how I know that he blacklisted me. You probably blacklisted yourself by trying to tell Dan DiDio how to run his fucking business, as if you knew better than him at the time. Like, it's absolutely ridiculous. So that one there from Larry Hama is just fucking stupid, just on its face with the words that he presented. You, sir, are a dumbass. That's all I can say to Larry Hama, and I enjoy you. I think you're a great person. Your Snake Eye stuff, your G.I. Joe stuff, your Wolverine stuff, all brilliant stuff. Chef's fucking kiss on that stuff. But as a human being, you might be a bit of a fucking moron. Now let's get over to the Mark Waid stuff. As for Waid, he responded to Hama's comment on Igo's post writing, and Devin Grayson, and Alan Grant, and me, and half a dozen other artists. He had a long list. Later in the thread, he also claimed that DiDio blacklisted Mike Wieringo and Humberto Ramos. I'll actually listen to a story about Dan DiDio blacklisting Mike Wieringo and Humberto Ramos and Alan Grant, when I fucking hear about it. I've never actually heard that story, but I certainly have heard the story that Mark Waid himself was blacklisted for DC Comics. As far as I know, it was Bob fucking Harris that actually blacklisted Mark Waid from DC Comics when he was EIC. And he wasn't ever going to return as long as Bob Harris was associated with DC Comics. And shockingly, after Bob Harris was fired by DC Comics, or fired from DC Comics, I think it was actually by Warner Brothers, Mark Waid returned, and he wrote a short story for Superman. And then he's on Batman Superman World's Finest. He did the Lazarus Planet event, and now he's doing some other books like Shazam or whatever. To my knowledge, Dan DiDio, he probably knew about it, but actually had nothing to do with Mark Waid being blacklisted from comic books. It was all a Bob Harris thing. And quite frankly, from the story that I've heard, the details that I've been made aware of behind the scenes, I think Bob Harris did the right thing. Mark Waid, for as great a writer as he is on his best day, and he's certainly written some great comic books, is kind of a fucking scumbag. Like, the thing that got him fired was that there was like a DC artist that murdered his wife. And there is a rumor that perhaps Mark Waid had something to do with it. Maybe there was an affair or something like that going on. And then Mark Waid made like a short little comic book, got it published through DC Comics, making fun of the fact that this guy murdered his wife with a hammer that was associated with DC Comics. And there was a behind the scenes rumor that Mark Waid might have been having an extramarital affair with the woman at the time that was murdered. As far as I know, that's why he was blacklisted from DC Comics until fucking Bob Harris was fired. And I would have done the same thing. You can't have some type of accountability. You can't have some type of personal standards of conduct with people. Do you really want somebody like that associated with your company? At this point, DC really doesn't have any choice. But as far as I know, nothing to fucking do with Dan DiDio. Completely a Bob Harris thing. And Mark Waid, for the most part, probably asked for it, for being an asshole, for being himself. And as far as like Devin Grayson never should have been hired in the first place. That was a fucking nepotism hire. Devin Grayson was hired and put on Nightwing because she was dating fucking Mark Waid. That's absolutely terrible. That's how you ruin businesses. Nepotism, cronyism, and shit like that. And I never heard that Devin Grayson was blacklisted from DC Comics, but I think that was a fucking good reason to do it because she never should have been hired in the first place because of her fucking relationship with you. Absolutely insane stuff going on there. And of course, this all started because so many people were just up in arms, specifically Jamal Igle, about Dan DiDio talking to the Comicsgate people. Jamal Igle reacted on Facebook stating, "I just unfriended an ex-employer for crossing a line they could never come back from. Once you cross that Comicsgate line, we're done, professionally and personally." IDW Publishing Group editor Heather Antos reacted to Igle's declaration and approving of it, gave it 100%. Writer Mark Russell, who worked on the Flintstones, Wonder Twins, and Batman Urban Legends, reacted writing, "Completely understandable." Mahmoud Asrar shared a number of emojis clearly approving of the announcement because Dan DiDio is not allowed to promote his product. Dan DiDio is not a grown man. He's not allowed to go out there and actually market his products on an unapproved website associated with Comicsgate. I mean, JDA is the worst. He's associated with Comicsgate. If you even do an interview with him and don't say anything bad and basically talk around a subject that you didn't want to get into, we will still try and get you blacklisted and unfriended and all this kind of stuff. And, like Mark Russell, who the fuck would Mark Russell be without Dan DiDio giving him those stupid Snagglepuss and Flintstone comic books? He'd be on Black Mask and no one would know his name. Now, for the most part, nobody does know his name because he doesn't write anything good. And he's basically an untalented version of like Cy Spurrier. And you know how I feel about Cy Spurrier. That ought to tell you how I feel about Mark Russell and his writing ability. But that dude wouldn't have a fucking career without Dan DiDio. But it's completely understandable that you would never associate with the guy ever in your life again because he did an interview with someone that you didn't like. And Heather Antos, "Let's go, baby, woo, woo, woo." Your company's about to be out of business. Valiant ain't going to hire you again. Marvel ain't going to hire you again. DC probably won't hire you. I don't know. Should you be burning bridges to people that can actually hire you for another job in the future? I mean, IDW's probably only got 6 months left before they go completely fucking solvent. They've probably been there for quite some time. They're just barely keeping their heads above water. Oh, and let's not forget the fact that you ruined their Star Trek line, which wasn't good to begin with. Can a Heather Antos really afford to be burning bridges? I would say no. And Jamal Igle, who's a very talented artist, and even on his Facebook, he's like, yeah, I don't like to make personal attacks. I don't like to get personal with people. Yeah, sure. You only threw Dan DiDio under the bus for talking to someone that you didn't approve of. So I don't know. This comic book industry is full of a bunch of fucking retards. Every single week it's something like this, but I might not have appreciated Dan Didio's creative oversight of DC Comics when he was the boss, but at least it felt like they had a boss and he would talk to people and he kept people employed. And he actually wanted to hear from the comic book fans and stuff like that. Most of these morons should be learning from Dan DiDio at this point rather than trying to vilify him for going on a fucking YouTube channel that has more of a reach than any of them ever probably will in their lives. Absolutely ridiculous stuff. This is just another reason for me to remember what an absolute prick Mark Waid is and why I had to fucking talk myself into supporting the guy when he returned to DC Comics in the fucking first place. In fact, I actually had to talk it out with all of you guys. This is just a stream of thought on why Mark Waid is such a fucking prick and why I didn't want to support him in the first place, because he'll never fucking change. He'll always be an asshole. There's also a link in the video description.